Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for your patience, and thank you for having an open mind and an open heart to explore with us the next great step that the Inn is being able to move forward as an opportunity for the guests at the Mary Brennan Inn. And for some of you who know, that's the building next door. We can actually see it through this window. Over 2 years ago now, we got a phone call from the people who own that building, and they wanted to know, did we have any interest in that building? They said, we have an interest, and that it's right next door, but I thought they were looking to sell it. For some of you who have volunteered here for a long time, we've been in this location, and we own this building for over 15 years. The whole time, there was always a church operating out of that facility, and they didn't own the building, they just rented. And then one day, 2 years ago, they just disappeared. And we didn't know what happened to them. They used to give out food on the weekends, so when we, on Friday, would give them food, left over that would be okay for the guests. But the people who own the building said they just left, and they had the space available. It's 5,500 square feet, so it's half the size of this building, but it's on 2 floors. So when she asked me if we had an interest in the building, I thought they were looking to sell it. And I said, yes, we have an interest, but we have no money. And so she said, we're not talking about money. We're talking about, do you have an interest in the building? I said, under what terms? And she said, could you use it? And I said, yes, we could use it. She said, we would like to just offer it to you, not to give it to you, but to just, we have a family foundation that their father had recently passed away, and he was always a very big fan of what we did. And so was the whole family. And they wanted to see if they could make this building available to us to be an additional source of support for what we were trying here. And it's ironic, it happened right before Hurricane Sandy. Remember that happened? And at the time, we didn't know what we would do with it, but because we had that building, there were so many donations that came in because of Hurricane Sandy, including tractor trailers from Florida who had brought donations up here, water, food, clothing, everything. And we actually stored it in that building. So that building was a huge help to us during these last 2 years because it has allowed us to take extra items that are beneficial to the guests as well as for us getting through this difficult time. So when we went and saw the space, I, at the time, said this would be right next door. It really would be a center for transformative change. That's what I originally saw in my concept, and not change for the sake of change, but really putting all the pieces together that people need to step out of not needing the soup kitchen anymore. And I came, for some of you may not be aware, I worked in the corporate world for over 20 years before I came to the Inn, and I saw in the not-for-profit world that most of the services that help people who are guests of the Inn are very piecemeal. Everything is, they do job training here, they do resume writing here, they do GED, but no one connects all of the pieces together. And they also send people off to places that sometimes they get there and they're not eligible to participate, or they got the wrong information, or this isn't the right day, and then they got up all the energy to go there, and then they get depleted that it took a lot to get there, but they weren't able to put all the pieces together and move forward. So I had thought at the time that if there could be one place where all of those different items we could have an expert on, not necessarily offer that specific service, but look at what are the missing pieces for people who want to put their life back together, because their lives are in pieces, and the only way you can put it back together is you got to start at the beginning. And for some of the guests of the Inn, they actually, the reason they don't get benefits anywhere is they have no ID. They have no way of identifying themselves, who they are, substantiating
Excuse me,
everything.
Jane.
Thank you. Thank you. So they also have no way of having anyone get in touch with them. So you see some people have cell phones, some people don't have cell phones. Some people don't have a place if someone wanted to write them a letter. They have nowhere safe where they could get a piece of mail that they could be assured that nobody would have looked at it, touched it, or that it could be left in their name. Years ago, when the Inn was first here, most of our staff had a real problem with guests who didn't have ID because they were so frustrated about how difficult it was to get them ID. And they would work for months and months to get all of the papers together, and they would get them their ID, give it to them, and 2 weeks later, they lost it. And everyone said, how could they lose it after all of that work? And I said, I had to always calm the staff down about this, never the guests. I said, what does ID mean? It means you're somebody. If you don't think you're somebody, you don't need ID. And until somebody feels they are somebody, they don't need to identify. Nobody doesn't need an ID if you're nobody. You don't need to identify yourself if you're not anybody. So it's so important when people are trying to help somebody to not judge, and that's what our staff was doing, just out of human nature. They were just frustrated and upset that they would lose it. But we got over that, and we realized that that's the first stumbling block, is identification, contact, how do you communicate with someone about that. So I felt that if there could be one area that someone could go into where the first thing they would sit down with is say, do you have these basics? Do you have identification? Do you have a phone or some way for someone to reach you? And do you have a place where you can accept mail? And we need to make that whole for somebody to begin with. Some people might come in and say, you know, I already have that. So we say, fine, okay, what's the next step? The next step is, where are you staying? Do you have a roof over your head? Are you eligible for public assistance? Are you living in a place that, if I were to see it maybe and go in, I would say this is inhabitable, but this is where you're staying because this is all you can afford, or this is all whoever you know is allowing you to stay here. This is the best you can do because you don't have a family, or you don't have a support network who's in a position to help you. You can have family, you can have a support network, but sometimes the people you have, they're not that much better than your situation. And if you go in and take up their space with them, you jeopardize them, and they could be thrown out of wherever they're renting. So there's a lot of complications that guests are facing, but many of them will not share that with you because it's too raw. It's really the base of how they're surviving. Coming in here to eat is how they're getting through the day from a food standpoint, but all the other pieces are just not there. So the second place is, what's their housing like? Are they eligible for public assistance? How to make that happen. The third place after that would be a space where we would look at education. Did you ever finish high school? If you didn't, did you ever get a GED? Did you ever go to college for a little bit? Some people have. Did you have any kind of formal education that finished at some point? And so that the next piece of education is really the way out of poverty, because education gives you the resources that you need to compete with in the job market and to try and get a job so that you can become economically independent and not need to eat in the soup kitchen. So education would be the next space that they would see. And then the next space after that would be employment. And looking at the Department of Labor right now has over 20 different areas that they train people in for jobs, but it's in Plainview. And who's going to get from here to Plainview? And they say nobody comes to these trainings. And we just say the only people who come to trainings are people who have cars and could drive there. But people have to use public transportation. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced public transportation on Long Island is not existent in any meaningful way. So what we want to do, and this is sort of a combination of education and workforce development, is we really want to talk to the Department of Labor about those kinds of trainings. Of the 20+ trainings, maybe 5 of them are in areas that the guests would be eligible, because you have to have certain basic skills to do certain trainings. So if we could pick 5 or 6 of them and entertain with the Department of Labor, would they be willing to come here if we got enough people and give the class right here after the meal is finished and we clean up, and we will have space also next door. So that's the missing piece, but of getting people the training they need, but then connected to that is an actual job. And this is where everyone gets people training and then expects them to find it on your own, where you're going to go get a job. We need to do the research to find the companies who are hiring people with that type of skill, who are in this geographic area, and say, right now, if you have an opening in your company, you're taking people off the street. You're taking people from answering an ad Newsday or online. You don't know anything about them. We have individuals who have been trained to do your type of work. This is their certificate. They finished this training. We know them. We want to know, would you take a chance? And in taking a chance, would you give someone a chance to get an entry-level position and move forward with their life? So the next piece will be the workforce development, developing it, but having it connected with the training. It's really a package. You can't get somebody trained and not have a goal on the other side of where do the companies that we are going to be willing to give a number of them a shot. And that's what we need to do, even if it's further away. And what we're going to be doing is looking to raise funds to get the big issue for many people is transportation. Even if they got the job, they don't have the money for the public transportation to get there for the first 2 weeks. I feel to negotiate with the employers, we're going to look to see if we can get 3 weeks of transportation for each candidate. And the 3 weeks are the first week, if you're going to take a chance, the first week an individual can go in and show them what they have, show them how they are able to do this job, and get back and forth, and there's no requirement other than they don't have a job right now, this is a chance for a job, they just need to get back and forth for the first week. At the end of the first week, hopefully showing they can do the job, that there would be the understanding there is an opening there, and that the next 2 weeks, when they have the job and would be being paid, they won't be paid to the end of the 2 weeks. So for those first 2 weeks, they will have the transportation to go back and forth. See, it has to be all of a piece. And then the other part is, after they have a job, is what are they going to do 3 years and 5 years from now? What are they going to also be educated for to move up? Because entry level is one place. We need to know, what are they going to be doing when they're 45, if they're 35 now? And what education can they be working on while they're working to aspire to their next job that they will go. And then the last space over there will be financial management. That so many people, after they get money, it's how to manage it so that they can literally hold on to enough of it and move out of maybe where they're living, get a better place to live. And it's all the research that we'll be sort of a hub. And it's almost like the spokes of a wheel. Each spoke will be a different area that an individual can come in. Some people will not come to the first spoke. They don't have any problem with their ID. Some people will not come to the education. They already have their education down. They come right into the jobs. Some people might even have a job and just come into the financial management. That's all they need. But what we need is we need volunteers to help us do the research, to have these 6 areas up to date every week with the latest information about what we can do in each area. And then once we're up to date with that, it's really keeping it up to date, not just having a phone number and an address, actually going there and seeing what it feels like to go there and fill out the papers and what's the person's name, and make sure that we have current information on anybody that we're referring out to. See, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. If there's 3 organizations right now doing a bang-up job doing resume writing, we don't need to put a 4th one in here. But we need to scout out and be detectives and say, if we're sending you to a place, we want to know that when you're going to go there, that you're going to have that positive experience. But more importantly, after you go there, we want to show you, you come back to us and we'll take you to the next step. You know, this is how it's going to be. And we're going to also need volunteers to actually go with the guests over there, because for many people, they don't have anyone to translate for them what they just heard. You told me I have to do what? It's like going to the doctor's office and sometimes you're so distracted, you don't know what the person told him. Am I supposed to take 2 of these on one day? And like, if there's another person with you, they can really say, does this make sense to you? Is this okay? Is this the right time for you? And that's the other thing, that so many guests get so disappointed by the fact that they get upset if you told them to go to a certain place and they had an appointment at 2:30 and something happened earlier that day and they didn't get to go to 2:30. They are horrified that they don't want to come back and disappoint you and tell you they never got there. So they'll never come back here. We need them to know the whole thing is flexible. If you didn't make it at 2:30, there'll be another appointment. That we have to change people's thought process of how they get help. And this is going to be the hub upstairs. Downstairs is going to be, so I started on the 2nd floor because that's the top. But in your papers you'll see there's a drawing of the 2nd floor is where I was talking about. They would walk upstairs and then these would be the desks for all of the different categories of which ones. This would be somebody directing them here, which spoke in the wheel do you need to come in at, and go over and sit down and hopefully even have somebody with you. There'll be a waiting area here, and we have a computer training room also there, that we have a group of students from Syosset High School have a special Milo project where they actually refurbish old computers and teach people how to use them and then give them to them. So there'll be computers in here for people who may be so advanced they can just go in and start using computers to get online and know what's going on. The social worker, Nicole, who's here, after the lunch is served, she will be coming over here, so she will be, for anyone who needs a social worker, she will be there for the afternoon hours before she would go. And then this additional services office will be for the Women's Bar Association that comes in and helps people once a week. If different groups came in and were giving help that we clear, this is where they would give out additional services. So and then there's 2 bathrooms up there as well. So that's the 2nd floor when you first walk up. And then the 1st floor is going to be, and you can look at it's in your papers too. The 1st floor is where the new boutique is going to move over. It's actually 50% larger than what's here. So it's going to be a much bigger space. The guests are going to go downstairs and there'll be a waiting area, because remember now the meal is not connected to the clothing anymore. And that's actually going to de-stress the Mary Brennan Inn tremendously, because right now so many of the guests are telling us that when they come in on the days that you have the clothing open, they have to, that psychologically they have to make a choice. Is it more important for them to get the clothing or the meal? And even though you think they can have both, some of them, they don't have that time. They don't have the time to do both. And believe it or not, from years ago, before we even moved in this building, on the days we gave out clothing, there were more people here than on the normal days. And that shows we're one of the few places that gives away clothing for free. So it's an essential that you would think you need food more than clothing. Not if you're wearing disposable clothing. You know, and when was the last time you changed? Everybody presumes, Well, you just go to a laundromat and clean your clothes. That requires you to have money. You have to have money to pay for the clothes, and you have to have something else to put on. Where are you presuming that that's the case? But so when people have the clothing and then they don't have it again, people get upset. Sometimes someone else took it. Sometimes it literally was not able to be used anymore. So that's, and then there'll be another classroom downstairs, and this is where we might have individuals come in and do motivational speaking for people to get their spirits up. We might have humorists come in who will talk about lifting their sense of humor. You know, some people, believe it or not, when you're suffering from depression, your muscles that you use for laughter are atrophied, and you can't laugh, you can't feel anything. So we're going to explore the possibility of having people come in who could do stand-up comedy. It's all about laughter. People can lighten things up and feel a sense of hope. That's what it's going to be. And so for the clothing area, we are going to have a meeting with people in the clothing area right now in early April. The front of the building right now is going to actually have an opening here, and the clothing will not be dropped off there, okay? The clothing will not be dropped off over there. It will still come here. We will put it in big bins, and then at the end of the lunch meal every day, it will be brought over, put in here, and this will be our donation receiving area. And there'll be a little lounge with like this, but a tinier one over there for the volunteers who will work over there. We'll have a table and chairs. But the donations will come in here in the big bins, and they'll just be rolled all the way back here to this big giant room in the back where it will be stored. It will be sorted, and then you'll bring it right into the boutique. The guests will come down the stairs, wait in the waiting area, go into the boutique, do everything, come back out through here, and then go right back out. So there'll be like a flow of traffic that they'll be able to come in, but the volunteers will be able to work from here and then come in this way to restock. So, but it's much bigger, and it really looks nice. You know, it's real. I mean, I haven't seen the walls finished, but just to see that much space, it's so much bigger. It's actually like an L shape. So, and we will have one area of this will be Dress for Success type clothes. So there will be a section where for people getting the jobs up here, they'll be able to go down here and get the clothing they need. Okay. We will keep like a small amount of clothing obviously over here for people who are going to come and still take showers here and need to put something else on. So we will have to have a small amount of just basics if someone had to put on, you know, but not, if you notice, there's not that many people taking clothing, but if we had a small few boxes with different pairs of jeans and shirts and stuff for men and women and underwear and socks, we're still going to do that here. But over here, that's, you know, that's sort of what the Center for Transformative Change is about. It's moving things over. And what we will do is we will take the clothing area now, and it will be, after it moves over there, it will be transformed into a family dining room. So all the families will eat in there. So 2 different phases. The first phase is really about the research that we need based on where your interest level is, or if you're just willing to help in anything. It's really doing research to find out, other than in the education area, all of the other services that are available. How would we go about getting people IDs? What the whole process is. Some of you may or may not be aware the Department of Motor Vehicle has photo IDs for people who don't drive, that they need something, but it's really about, if we had to get somebody's birth certificate, if they're from the United States, how do you go about that? Some of it will be done online, but it's really a question of helping us do the research in each category of what's the best thing we can do. And then we will be doing ongoing research even after it's open. Because one of the greatest shortcomings, I believe, in most organizations trying to refer people is the information they have is old. It's not current. So it doesn't, like, it was, when it was put down, it made sense, but no one ever bothered to go there and really find out What happens when you actually walk in? What does it feel like? I want us to be decoys going into any place that we're going to refer anyone to. We're going to not only have gone in and experienced and make sure it matches the standards of how the inn does stuff. Otherwise, it's very confusing. Years ago, before we had this space, we used to refer people from our old soup kitchen to other organizations that did this type of additional service. And the guests would go there and they'd come back and they say, why did you send me there? And we said, well, because they have a brochure that says they do this. And they said, I went and spoke to somebody, and the only difference between me and them, the person behind the desk and myself, is they have a job, a car, and a place to live. But emotionally, I might be in better shape than they are. Because people are burnt out, a lot of people are burnt out doing this work. They're doing what needs to be done, but they're just going through the motions. We really need to emotionally engage with anybody who's going to be willing to help, to come and journey out of here. You know, if we serve over 300 people today, maybe 100 of those individuals, if they had this, wouldn't be eating here. But maybe 200 will have to keep eating here. But even the 200 who have to keep eating here because they're not going to be able to be employed, what are they doing with the rest of their day and their time? How many people are sitting in hospitals, nursing homes, after school with nobody to physically interact with them? That just because you're disabled or not able, do they have the benefits? Are they living in a decent place? And then what are they doing with their time? Even as a volunteer, if they can't be paid. Everybody has a purpose. We're all here to be of service. And we're just grateful that all of you are interested and willing to explore this next step. The phase 2 will be actually, depending on what day you volunteer, what day you'd be willing to come over. This will actually be open right after the meal, like from 1 to 4. So it's really, you could almost come here and then go over, but what we don't want is if you're leaving here to go over there, to leave them short of finishing up here as well. So what I'm going to suggest is for those who volunteer here and still want to do this, is that in the course of a month, maybe initially, twice a month, you will just go there instead of coming here, and we'll find other volunteers, or you'll just rotate back and forth. You don't have to leave here, but what we are finding is that for some volunteers, this is physically getting to be too much. So if you're going to be over there on a day where you'll just be sitting on the desk and answering a phone and what have you, that would be a lot less strenuous than physically lifting the trays, moving things, and doing everything here. But you're going to be interacting on just a more intimate level with the guests in that they're one-on-one. And it's real, everybody is going to have to be screened and interviewed, and we have to make sure everyone has the right aptitude. Some people don't know what it's going to be like until they actually, experience it. We need to make sure that everybody feels comfortable. Just because you may not be, comfortable doing the direct interaction with the guests, but you could work with us getting the research and scouting out new resources for us. We just want this to be a place where it's the hub. If you come here, get the information you need, you can leave, come back, and go to the next step. But the whole goal is really a question of everybody's on a different timeline. So if you were John Doe and you came in and were sitting next to us and you were starting the process with us, and we got you your ID, and then the next step was education, we have a file now that has your name on it. And it may be that today is March 25th and we sat with you and we have your name on a file. He could say, I want to get my GED, I want to get a job and everything else, but let's just do this first. His file will have to go and wait till he comes back, and he needs to know whenever you come back is fine. Okay? If you come back the next day, or if you come back 12 months from now, you can still pick it up because we're going to keep the file. Not necessarily in a computer, just a real, and where somebody came in on the wheel, so to speak, of what they were looking for, and when they first came, what they thought. Life changes for everybody, and if it's going to change, we need to be flexible. And that's the message that is so important from all the guests that I have spoken to over all the years, is that they don't want to disappoint anybody. They feel that they've disappointed a lot of people. If I had a nickel for every guest who has told me, you know, it's too late for me, I missed the boat, meaning they didn't graduate at the right time, they didn't go to school, they didn't get a job, it's too late, they're now 37 years old, it's too late. And I've always said to them, but I never thought we would have the rest of the sentence, I've always said to them, yes, you're correct, you missed that boat. But now we can say, there's another boat, and it's right next door. We have a lot of boats docked next door, and you can come to the dock and we'll help you get on another boat. It's not too late. As long as you're still alive and functioning, it's not too late. And that's what we want to instill in everybody, is stop judging. Just when you're ready, we will help guide you through that. And we need to, unfortunately, there's no funding. They gave us the money to use the building, but there's no funding to pay staff. Cynthia is working with me as a paid staff member, obviously, to oversee this with us, but for the day-to-day doing all of it, it's all going to be with volunteers. So that's why we hope, without making Mary Brennan Inn feel too crazed about how many might want to come over, but you know, certain people couldn't be here today. That's why we're taping this right now, so that they can hear the same thing you heard. And that what we need you to fill out is, are you interested in doing this? And could you do phase 1 and phase 2 with us? Because we feel in order to do phase 2 and sit at a desk, as much of the research that is going to still be done on an ongoing basis, we're going to, and you could research only in one area for us. You don't have to research everything, but that we want to put teams together, that we'll have one group researching about IDs, another group researching about what are all the best financial management groups out there. We have so many banks that support us. They always want to come. We need to get people checking accounts as well as savings accounts. And this, most people have never had a savings account. We need, if you have $25 in a savings account and you know what it is, it's about building up for the future. Most people haven't had enough money to ever put anything into savings. But if we're on that goal, you have to have the tools. If you don't have the tools, you're never going to get there. God bless you. So, I think, I don't know, Tony's listening to this, because everybody has heard this. Like I've said this so many times, I feel like I'm a broken record that I should just like, but it's really, it's the dream, it's the way to go out of business for the guests who literally don't want to eat here. I have always said no one should aspire to become a regular in a soup kitchen. That shouldn't be your aspiration that you're eating here. But I do know that many of the guests have said to us, and said over the years, and still say it today, that what we're doing is saving their lives in the meantime. But this is the next step, to say for those who don't have to eat here forever, let's give them the raw ingredients so that they can put it together and then move on with their life. That's the whole purpose of this. So, and the other thing I just wanted to share, which was, some of you may or not have been here, I don't know if any of you are a Friday volunteer. Yes, yes. But a few weeks ago when the pipe broke and we couldn't have the guests, I spoke to at least like 30 or 40 of the guests who were standing online to apologize that the pipe broke and they couldn't eat a meal on Friday when it was the last day of the week and they could only get a bag lunch and go into the pantry. Every single one of the guests that I spoke to, every single one, without question, said, no problem. These things happen. Don't worry. Don't get yourself upset about this. Everyone. You would think somebody would be annoyed that they're coming in, it's the end of the week, they were looking forward to a hot meal. Every single one of them said the same thing. And that's why I call all of the guests the masters of the universe, because they have figured it out. They may not have everything in place like everyone else does, but they have figured out what's important, you know, how to behave.